Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to the program. It is 9:19 a.m. exactly. We will be with you till 10 o'clock this morning. And our next guest is Thembisa Fakude. He is a senior researcher at AFRASID. We're going to be looking at the first anniversary of the Russia-Ukraine war, which is on the 24th of February in 2 days' time. And here, the whole world was thinking in the early days of the invasion by Russia into the Ukraine that, oh, God, this will last for a couple of weeks, a couple of days, or a couple of weeks. And it is now almost 1 year on. So I guess the big question to ask is, a year on, regarding this war, which has impacted, I guess, ripple effects have been felt all around the world. What is the current state of the war, and the all-important question, the possibilities for peace? Assalamu alaikum to you, Thembisa Fakude. Welcome to the program, and how do you respond to my opening statement?
Wa alaikum salam, and thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah, yes, we all thought that this was going to be a short war, but it has taken a year because the Ukrainians have put up a fight. I think Vladimir Putin thought that it was going to be a walkover, but he was surprised when the Ukrainians put in a fight. But importantly is that what he initially went into this war for, as the objectives thereof have not been achieved. One was to demilitarize Ukraine, that was his claim, and the other claim was to denazify Ukraine. All of that has not happened because these were just pretexts. The fact that Volodymyr Zelensky is a Jew didn't make sense that Russia had to go there to denazify. And the most important one, which was demilitarization, what has actually happened, we see more now NATO coming in and investing itself in Ukraine, and Ukraine is more militarized than it was before this invasion.
Undoubtedly, I guess Zelensky held out and has held out this long simply because he's had all of the support from Western powers. Had that support not been forthcoming, the picture would look very different, would it not?
If the West did not come in to the assistance of Ukraine, the picture will certainly look different. But at the same time, we'll also be sitting with a new precedence in the world where any country or bully can come in and dictate to countries which friends the countries must choose and which politics countries must choose. So that precedent would have had much more devastating impact and effect in global politics. And secondly, Russia would have continued with its expansionist project into other countries surrounding Russia, because Putin's ambition is to resuscitate the great Soviet Union. And if the only way he can do that is to go shoot people of these former Soviet countries into submission. So we're lucky that he's not succeeding in Ukraine, and this sort of precedents will stop, and not proliferate as he intended to.
Obviously, there are huge costs on both sides. We do know that Russia's economy has taken a nosedive. The Ukraine, because it's been invaded by Russia, doesn't have an economy to speak about. The country is almost at a standstill. They've taken hundreds of thousands of civilians and got them conscripted into the army to defend themselves. So, do we see any winners in this war? Or, at the end of the day, eventually when the war does end, are they both going to be sitting with huge losses, human losses and economic losses?
Ukraine will be sitting with more losses, as we've seen the continuing wanton destruction of basic infrastructure, killing of women and children, and displacing millions of women and children. Ukraine has not attacked Russia proper. So Russia can't claim that it has been bombed by Ukraine. So far, we've seen Ukraine defending itself from Russia. What has happened is that the Western nations have responded to Russia's aggression in Ukraine by imposing sanctions and other measures, particularly economic measures and social, cultural isolation of Russia. But other than that, we haven't seen much destruction in Russia. But I think in the long term, Russia will begin to feel the pinch of these sanctions. But I think for me, importantly, I feel sorry for people of Russia because they are likely now to have a lifetime president in the form of Vladimir Putin.
Mm. Obviously, he's got an issue of loss of face. There's that issue on the one hand. There's the issue of he has been making noises about targeting other countries, his neighbors. Do you think that he should be taken seriously? Or is this a situation where he's going to have to go out once again and prove himself by invading another neighboring country?
Well, for me, what's more troubling is his threat of using nuclear weapons, because that's going to be very irresponsible if he does go ahead and is continually threatened to use nuclear weapons against Ukraine. And you're likely to have Western nations retaliating, and that will create a new situation in global politics and relations. So far, we've just had that irresponsible rhetoric and continued bombardment of installations in Ukraine. And he is likely, or he was likely, to go to other countries and invade them if he was winning in Ukraine, but we don't see that happening. Ukrainians are holding fort and are fighting back. We thought that by now Russia would have pushed back Ukraine, but Ukrainians are pushing back and reclaiming some of the land that has been or was conquered by Russia. So I don't think he's going to do that anytime soon. Right now he's on a back foot. The war in Ukraine is much more expensive. So for him to go and invade another country is going to be much more difficult. And the only country that he can go to is part of NATO, which is Poland, closest to him, and maybe Finland in the north. But it's going to be very difficult for him to do anything because this war is proving to be very costly, and I don't think the Western countries are allowed to go ahead.
So at the end of the day, he's gained nothing out of this war on the Ukraine. Would you think that? Would you agree with that sentiment?
Out of this war. In fact, what he has done, he has invited NATO to establish itself in Ukraine. Ukraine is much more armed than it was before. Brand Russia is gone out the window. Russia is a pariah state. He is isolated by the international community. Russian athletes and artists and all Russian people can't go free and participate in competition abroad. Sanctions are going to begin to bite in Russia. So he has absolutely nothing, except that, for the people of Russia, fearing that he might go and face the international courts for violation of basic human rights, he's likely to dig in his heels and cement his position and prolong his presidency. So he's not going anywhere, and that's going to be very sad for the people of Russia, because from now on they're going to have a lifetime president in the form of Vladimir Putin.
Okay, do you think that an escalation in the war is imminent, or do you think now that we, getting to the first year anniversary mark, that perhaps common sense prevails and Russia starts pulling out their troops and calls a truce? Or does it mean that there needs to be peace talks? We know that, I'm not sure if Turkey, post the devastating earthquakes, are in a position or will be in a position to try and initiate talks between these two nations. What do you suppose should be happening now to bring these two guys back to the table and to bring an end to the war?
Well, the Ukraine has made it clear that they don't negotiate before Russia pulls out of its territory. That's one. Two is there are moves at the moment at international courts to get put into account for his crime against humanity in terms of killing innocent people in Ukraine. So it's unlikely that you're going to have negotiation. What we will see now, we'll see Putin digging in his heels. We'll see some of his senior officials abandoning posts and defecting to the West. At least that's what I believe. You will see some of the oligarchs also starting to organize and isolating Putin. And that's the way to go. And there will be sporadic protests inside Moscow. People are going to start protesting as their quality of life deteriorates. So there is no way out for him right now. And I don't think the West, with him and his back against the wall, will make it easy for him to leave this current situation. He will have to fight all the way. Because he started the war, and I think they'll like to see him ousted as the end game.
I can't even begin to imagine what the Ukrainian and Russian people are experiencing right now in terms of being absolutely fatigued and exhausted by this war. But we are hearing murmurings from some Western diplomats saying that this war has cost a lot of money. It's really cost billions and billions and billions of dollars, I should imagine. And the West has had to supply all of the arms, munitions, etc., to Zelensky, to support Zelensky. And I think there's going to come a time where they're going to say, we can't support you any longer. What do you suppose would happen in a situation like that? Would Zelensky have to say, we've got to end this war, let us start our peace talks?
Well, the Americans have said yesterday that they're going to stay the course. Europeans have said the same. I don't see NATO and the US moving out of this war because it will mean defeat. And I don't think that Russia has got the necessary resources to push the West into submission. That's not going to happen. Russia is not the most richest country in the world. Besides, they are going to start continuing with the sanctions. So Russia will never exhaust the resources or reserves of both the Europeans, NATO, and the United States. It's just simply impossible. The only country that is likely to step out of this will be Russia, because its economy is a tiny drop compared to NATO, US, and the Europeans combined. So I don't think that the Russians will have enough stamina to see this to the end. By the time they reach, I predict, mid of this year, they would have exhausted much of their resources. As it is, they've kept the price of oil exports from Russia. So in other words, even if the oil price increase, Russia cannot sell its price based on the market price or rolling market price. It will always have to sell at a certain price. Besides, it can only sell to certain countries. In this case, it will be Turkey. So the situation is going to be dire for Russia moving forward, and I don't think they'll be able to withhold the position or exhaust the resources that are currently flooded to Ukraine by the Western nations.
Thembisa, given everything that you've said now, paints a picture of Putin having his back against the wall. And in that moment of madness, there is that horrible possibility that he could go the nuclear weaponry route. And that would be very, very dire, not only for the Ukraine, but for the global community.
Yes, and there are two things. I don't think the military top brass in Russia will want to go down with Putin because of his mistake in this war. Because the nuclear war means that everybody dies. And I'm not quite sure whether all of them are ready to go to Jannah at the moment. So they will try to stop him one way or the other. I don't think they will compromise their lives and that of their families for Vladimir Putin. There will come a point where they will isolate him, particularly because going nuclear is not going to be one man's decision. It's a chain of decisions, and that will involve a lot of people in Russia. And I don't think at the moment we've got that type of loyalty. That's the first point and option that he has. The other option, of course, is for him to disappear and follow the example of Hitler, which is another likelihood. Now that soon is going to have his back against the wall.
And that's where we leave it. Thembisa Fakude, always a pleasure talking to you. Love listening to all of your insights. You are a senior researcher at AFRASID. Till the next time, keep us in your du'as. Assalamu alaikum to you.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
9:34 news and views on Salam Media. Standing by to talk to us is a guest in Syria. We will cross over in a minute or two, but first let's take an ad break.